Hi everybody, this is Brian Koo with another ROK video, and things are calming down after 2+ days of a really good Zone 5 war here on the King of All Britain map. As you can see at this point now, my side has won. The camp of Mercia has beaten Wessex in this zone. We are just wrapping things up at this point. We've got a couple of last forts to burn down, and you can see that our camp is really taking a break today because I'm pretty sure this thing has been healing for a number of hours and not a single person has either noticed it or cared to join this coalition and port here and tap it. But let me go ahead. I want to recap this zone because honestly, this was probably the best Zone 5 fight I have played in Rise of Kingdoms. It was just a very fair, closely contested fight, and both teams had different styles of play, and what this showed is that you can actually play this game in different ways and you can have success. And I think that's a very important part of Rise of Kingdoms, where it can't just be spend a lot of money, dominate the field, and then it's just game over if the enemy does less than that. There were ways to counter a strong open field strategy, and we employed those tactics in this KvK, and I think it's worth talking about that here. But first and foremost, let's go ahead and look at the two camps that fought in this Zone 5. We are the camp of Mercia here. We have 4 camps with 1.5 billion KP. The coalition lead was Kingdom 1544. They have about 550 million KP, and they are a Korean alliance. My alliance 1770. We were the number 2 alliance here with 380 million KP. In Wessex, you have roughly the same KP, slightly more KP, slightly more power, and a few more members. I don't think the member count matters all that much because honestly, the two kingdoms here with the most members were also the 2 kingdoms that had the least KP in this zone. So I think the fact that they have a lot of members just means they're not really kicking people out too much. I think it is worth noting that 1544 only has 55 main accounts, whereas the biggest kingdom in Wessex, 2422, they have almost 40 more members than 1544 does, equal kill points. And my sense was that the 2422 players were online more than 1544. For 1544 as a Korean kingdom, they were online at times in big numbers, and then they were all offline at other times. So the way this zone played out is as follows. You know, the level 4 passes opened. We got out of our pass first, actually, which we have never gotten out of our pass first, but we did a little bit of research about how to do swarms correctly, and it paid off because we got into this zone first. I dropped the HDS fort right here, and shortly thereafter, 44 KO, our Korean allies, they dropped the 44 KO fort here. The enemy had forts on the bottom side of this holy site, and the race was on to get our flag lines to this location. Now, the enemy did a really good job of dropping forts to block our progress and also the progress of our allies. I would guess that between the 2 of these alliances, they probably dropped about 10 blocking forts, something like that. We also blocked the enemy very well. We particularly blocked End very well here. And I think that the key to the opening of this zone is that the enemy did not do a good job of blocking 44 KO. 44 KO flagged very quickly, and I'm not exactly sure why they didn't block 44 KO. They definitely blocked us. They definitely blocked us, but they should have blocked the Koreans as well because they did some serious damage once they got to this holy site. They flagged around their own fort and then destroyed the end fort that was right around here. Now, one thing that's interesting to me is that the very first flag that we destroyed in this zone was an end flag right over here. Our flag was finishing a minute before theirs. We noticed that their presence was pretty light over here, so we had a bunch of players bum rush this area, swarm down their flag. And as the war went on for 36 hours, a ton of fighting took place right here at this spot. a lot of fighting also took place right around here. This is where the first flags got burned down. This is where the first flag burning in both directions happened. And I just think it's worth noting that the zone opening is really important, because the territory you take often ends up being the territory that you end up fighting over for the longest in the KvK. So we did get a little bit of additional area around this holy site early on. I do think that was important in the fights to come. But, you know, the zone kicked off, and, you know, it was very fair for a few hours. Then our Koreans actually went offline. It was late night in Korea. They went offline. They didn't even say anything to us that they were going to go offline. We just sort of noticed that we had gone from doing well in the field to getting our butts kicked in the field. And so we went into turtle mode in HDS. We knew that we couldn't come close to competing with the enemy in the open field, but we also knew that you have to slow down the enemy's progress in their uptime. Whatever you can do to slow them down and make it hurt as they burn your flags, you have to do those things. And that is just a discipline that we have had for many years. And we got to it, slowing them down as much as we could in our Korean allies' downtime. I think one very important moment that happened on day one is that after the enemy burned down one of our flags that was touching them, we made it hurt for them to burn this thing down, but they did get it burned down. They didn't really trade that badly for it. At that point, the enemy decided not to touch us. They just left. They left a disconnected area between our two territories, and they really focused entirely on fighting in this area near the holy, south of the holy site, near 44 KO's territory. They really wanted to burn down 44 KO's territory. Happened eventually on the first night is that the Koreans started to wake up, and we started to compete more and more effectively against Wessex. Now, at this point, Wessex had not shown any downtime at all. They had been very active from the start of the zone until that point. And so I sort of was getting worried. I was like, are they going to have any sort of downtime at all? And so the first night got more and more exciting as we just slowly found that we were able to compete on an even playing field with the Wessex juggernaut. At first, we stopped them from burning our flags. That was the first step. The next step is that we started to win some open field fights. And then eventually we got a burn or two on Wessex. And to be honest, once it became clear that we were the team that was winning, Wessex went into very heavy downtime. It was not a gradual thing. It was a pretty sharp contrast where they were competing very hard 1 hour, and then a couple hours later, as far as I could tell, it was on free burn. I tended to go to sleep at this time, knowing that the next day, when their uptime was happening again, we would be in for another long day. That was certainly the case. There was a ton of pressure again on day two. Wessex had a ton of field. They were good at attacking, and the 44 KO flag line was under threat many times. Flags did get burned down, back flags got built, and it was a long process of holding in this center area where the most intense fights were happening. At the same time, there was a lot happening on the sides that was very positive for us. On the left side, our allies, 13 LI, they had been having a lot of success since the start of the zone, flanking this left side, beating up on the weakest kingdom in Wessex, and they were slowly inching towards the middle of this zone, slowly getting to a point where they might start to burn down some of that important teleport area. At the same time, we had been having success on the right side, just free burning the enemy or free building towards the enemy. We had a few players who just devoted most of their attention to this area with not only their main account but also with their farms, and so we were starting to be a danger on the right flank. I don't think that flanking in a zone like this is super important. I actually don't think it's that important. I think what's really important is that you win the area and you win the flags that are the most contested by both teams. If you can't win the fights that the two teams care about the most, then you're probably not the stronger team. If you're winning those fights that everybody cares about the most, you're probably stronger than your opponent, and you're probably going to win the zone one way or another. What I think flanking does is it's a leverage point, it's a multiplier when you are in control. When you are free burning the enemy and when they have downtime, these flanks allow you to expand quickly and start to cut into their important territory. That is what we did on both night 1 and night 2 when the enemy went into their downtime. If there was one single key to this zone, I think the fact that we were much more effective in their downtime applying maximal punishment, whereas in our downtime we did a pretty good job of slowing down the punishment. I think that was the key to this zone. That has always been incredibly important in A Kingdom and lower KvKs, is who has more downtime. We just overall had less downtime than the enemy, or we just handled the downtime situations better than they did. And I think that was probably the biggest key to this zone. Now, what made this fight really good, in my opinion, is that there is counterplay. There's counterplay still exists in Rise of Kingdoms. And I think the best example of that is on day 2, when one End, which was the number 2 alliance in Wessex, they used their farm alliance to try and cut us off in N70H. They used skillful craftsmen, they attacked a bunch of our flags, and we were very close to losing all of our N70H territory. Now, we had smartly put down an N70D fort at that point, which was protected, and so it wasn't that big of a deal if we lost the N70H territory, but A, we didn't want to lose it, and B, we didn't want anybody to get zeroed by getting cut off. And the thing is, even though End had much stronger open field than we had, especially during their uptimes, we were able to put a lot of cities around these flags, which is a great defensive posture, by the way. Like, you pick exactly which cities you want to have around a flag. And we were able to put more reinforcements into the flag than End was able to fill their rallies with. And so at the end of the day, they simply could not burn us. We had too many reinforcements and they had too few reinforcements to burn us. And I think it's good that in this game, if you expand your territory enough where the enemy is forced to break your flag line, that if you play very good defense, you can stop them from doing that. No matter how much open field dominance they have, you have the ability to stop them if you bring more people to the fight than they do from a reinforcement perspective. Now, the other thing that is cool about the counterplay here is that the rally and garrison situation is a bit of a rock, paper, scissors dynamic. The most popular garrison in this KvK was Gorgo Hector. The brand new Gorgo Hector infantry garrison was favored by both teams as this war went on. The way I describe it is that Gorgo Hector is better than Gorgo Heraclius at fighting against rallies, and it's better than Gorgo Toku at fighting against swarms. So Hector is essentially in the middle, where he's pretty good against rallies and he's pretty good against swarm, and that does make him a very sturdy and pretty balanced garrison commander. At the same time, Shapur Asher rallies do counter Gorgo Hera. Gorgo Hera is not good at dealing with skill damage, and so Shapur Asher can get a good trade against this new number 1 garrison. At the same time, Shapur Asher rallies can be countered by swarming the rally. They are the strongest rally, but they are also susceptible to swarm. If you want a rally that is sturdier, that has more sustain, that is easier to reinforce steadily, then you would run either Attila Subutai or you would run Scipio Wallace. The problem is that those two rallies are hard countered by Gorgo Hector, because Gorgo Hector does very well against normal damage. So it's not a super complicated countering situation, but it's a situation where you can look at the Garrison and make good decisions about what to attack it with. In a zone like this that is very big, where there are a lot of touch points, there were inevitably situations where you saw a Gorgo Hera in an enemy flag. When you see the Gorgo Hera, you have a great opportunity to use Attila Subutai. Attila Subutai does fantastic against Gorgo Hera, and it gives you a chance to kill off your cavalry, which is for sure the least important troop type at this moment. So there is skill in seeing what the opponent does and reacting with the appropriate counterplay. You can do that on the Garrison and rally level. You can do that on the uptime, downtime level. And to some extent, you can also do it in the open field. Because as much as account strength and numbers of players is the main factor in the open field is also extremely skill-based, and we had some excellent open field fights in this zone. As someone who has gotten very good at dot mode, I have realized that there are now people who are better at open field fighting than I am, because they have mastered the advanced tactic of standing still and essentially attacking the enemy without moving and without any of your marches fanning forward. You do this by zooming in, attacking the enemy, and then retreating in a way where all of your marches stack on top of one another. When the enemy then enters your attack area, you automatically attack that enemy, but your marches don't move at all. This is, of course, very powerful when pulled off effectively, and there are now many players in the game who use this technique, and it is a process now for dot mode players and for dot mode heavy kingdoms to figure out how do we tip the scale more in our favor again, because these zoomed in players have gotten so good at standing still and kicking our butt. How do we get them into positions where it's harder to do that technique? That's what's happening on the tactical level in the open field. On the strategic level, war leads are having to make very difficult choices about when do we ball up, where do we ball up, and if the enemy gathers way more troops than we gather, what do we do? Do we still take this fight? Do we still charge into them? Do we still fight them aggressively? Do we run away like cowards as the fight is happening? Or do we tell our players to break up the ball before the fight even happens, knowing that we're going to lose? As a war lead who was on the losing side of more open field fights in this zone than I won, I had really tough decisions to make about, where do we ball? Do we even bring our marches out? How much am I even directing players about where to go versus letting everyone just cook individually? Because when you ball up, you put all those players in harm's way. Every single player is in harm's way. They're standing there, they're expecting to fight, and if the enemy brings more marches than you have, there's no good way of telling everyone at the same time to retreat. That's also bad for vibes. So open field is, a skill-based thing, but at the same time, it also is very dependent on account strength, and it is dependent on the numbers you have. At the end of the day, we are just clicking buttons and targeting someone. It's not all that complicated what is happening. So, certainly Wales have a big advantage in this game for sure, especially in a Zone 5 where they're more ahead in Crystal Tech. But, we dealt with it pretty good here. At the end of the day, even though the enemy did have more Wales than us, I think they probably had more pilots than us too, and they played well. We still managed to do enough to win the zone, and I just think that means that skill has not gone away from Rise of Kingdoms. It's just changing a little bit. It's honestly just changing around a little bit. More of the skill is happening directly in the open field now, and a little bit less is happening with territory building and with, you know, like motivating your players to play long hours. But there's still a lot of skill in the game. There's still a lot of counterplay, and I think that does make for a vibrant game where you don't just, it's not purely pay to win, right? It's not purely pay to win. And the thing is, a player who is free to play can still be incredibly valuable to their kingdom. In this war, when we were trying to defend the 44 KO flags on both Night 1 and Night 2, we had a lot of people sending farm reinforcements from north of the holy site, and they had to bring those marches over through heavy enemy open field presence. So people basically had to hop from one city to another. They might have had to hop through a dozen cities to get to their intended destination. That takes a lot of effort to do that. But the players who put in that effort, who brought their farm reinforcements to key flags that were being heavily contested, they were able to play a very important role in the outcome of this zone. Yes, the people fighting in the open field, yes, the people racking up a lot of kill points, they played a huge role in this, but the people who were filling rallies and filling farms played a huge role too. We could not have won this zone if we did not outfill this enemy, but because our average player went to the effort of getting their reinforcements in the right place at the right time, we were able to pull off some very nice defenses against a very strong enemy offense. Now, because I am making a video talking about this KvK, and because I'm a leader of one of the kingdoms in this KvK, I do want the comment section of this video to be a place where people can talk about what is happening in this Lost Kingdom now. With the Zone 5 fights wrapping up, what has happened is that the king of 14 VA, the leader of East Anglia camp, they have announced that they will no longer be participating in this KvK. They have decided that it is too imbalanced, and so they have dropped out of the KvK. That has also, I believe, caused Wessex, who we fought against, to drop out of this war. Now, one thing I want to say is that we're saying that this is the decision of the king of 14 VA, but ultimately we do not know what the leadership team of 14 VA is saying, and we also do not know what the other kingdoms in East Anglia are saying. I don't think this is really a decision that one person made. I think this is a decision that a camp makes, but it's oftentimes like one person driving it. So I just want to say that off the bat. And also, to be fair, I want to say that I am no longer in the judgment business when it comes to decisions that kingdoms make in Rise of Kingdoms. At the end of the day, you are beholden to the players in your kingdom more than anything else. When you form a camp, you also have some responsibility to the people in your camp. But you have the right to act out of your own interests in this game. I think it is true that East Anglia and Wessex are very big underdogs at this point in the KvK. I would give them maybe a 5 to 10% chance of winning this KvK. So there is, some merit to being like, well, we're not going to drain ourselves. We're not going to zero our resources and speed ups in a fight that we know we can't win. There's some logic to that, but at the same time, we had two very good Zone 5 fights, right? Our fight was excellent, very closely contested. The fight here in Lincoln was also very good. People were not sure whether East Anglia would even show up to fight because they did complain about the matchmaking even before we entered the Lost Kingdom. But they did show up, they did set up a fort wall, and they held that fort wall for about 36 hours. The fight in Lincoln lasted roughly as long as the fight lasted in Gloucester. Now, I do want to show you the stats of that zone. the 2 Zone 5 fights. I do want to show you the stats because I think those are relevant here. If you look at this, the third column, the KP column, you'll see that Wessex has 70.3 billion KP, which is roughly as much as our allies in Northumbria had in the other zone. And overall, they outkilled us by 7.5 billion KP. So Wessex really did beat us trade-wise in this zone. And in the other zone, East Anglia versus Northumbria, East Anglia had a very solid performance. They only were outscored by 5 billion KP. They held off the Northumbria juggernaut for something like 36 hours. We can see from these stats that our zone had a lot more deads. We had roughly 100 million more deads per team. Wessex, the strongest camp on their side, did take 100 million more deads than Northumbria took, which is not insignificant. 100 million more deads is basically like 25 good farms out of commission right there. But a lot of this is going to be on main accounts, actually, so it's even more significant. So I think we can maybe say that the enemy team is a little bit more drained than we are. But I think when the stats are that close, it's a tough call to drop out of the KvK entirely. It really is. It's a pretty wild choice to drop out, I think. Because ultimately you're not just screwing your camp, you're really screwing your allies in Wessex as well, because I think Wessex had a very good chance of doing well against us at the Altars of Darkness. They might still fight us at the Altars of Darkness. And I also think Wessex would have had a good shot at a level 7 pass situation against Mercia. Now, from what I understand at this point is Wessex, I don't know if they've made a definitive decision about what they are doing, but what they have said is that if Northumbria comes over to the level 7 passes to help us, they will drop out at that point. So we might have some altar fights before then, but there's not a whole point to Wessex going hard in the paint if A, their allies have dropped out, and B, if our allies come over here at the level 7 passes to help us. I don't think like final decisions have been made on all of that stuff. There was also talk of us switching level 7 passes where we fight against East Anglia and then Northumbria comes and fights over Wessex. I think that will be a little more fair because Pass 7 is so open field heavy, and I do think Wessex is stronger in the open field than we are. And you know what? If we're just going to call it a day on this KvK and get ready for the next one, I personally don't mind it too much. I do know there's probably tons and tons of people who are unhappy about this because they got ready to fight a long, hard war, and this was looking like it was going to be a long, hard war. So I can certainly understand why a lot of people would be upset about this. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, everyone sacrifices a lot for this game. And I don't really criticize anyone else for the level of sacrifice they make. I respect the level of sacrifice that everyone makes to play Rise of Kingdoms at a high level. So I'm just not going too hard on anybody who made the decisions to drop out of this KvK. I think it could have been done differently, right? I mean, you can fight at the level, you can fight at the altars, right? You can fight at the altars hard, and honestly, as a 4-kingdom camp, I think East Anglia matches up pretty well against Northumbria at the altars. And then you can just turtle at the level 7 passes. Like, you don't have to fight in the field. You can turtle inside your cities and inside your forts at the level 7 passes if you want to. And then you go into Kingsland, and anything can happen here. It is a small Kingsland, so that does increase the variance. And, you know, if Kingsland isn't going well for you, then you just drop out after, 8 hours, 10 hours, whatever it may be. You don't have to fully commit to a Kingsland fight. So I think this could have been navigated differently by East Anglia, but, like I said, personally, I'm not all that bummed about it. We had a good fight, and I check out emotionally as soon as these fights end, and I've already checked out emotionally, so I don't mind the fact that I don't have to turn it back on here in a few weeks. So anyway, that is what's going on with the KvK. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to throw a like on it and subscribe to my channel. That is a great way to support my content. If you want to throw a comment about your opinions about anything I had to say here, do share your comment as well. That's another great way to support me. And thank you all for watching. And until next time, I will see you all on the flip side.